Saddam Hussein, one of the most ruthless dictators in history, committed countless crimes and horrific acts throughout his career. But Saddam isn't the only member of the Hussein family that is remembered today for all the atrocities he committed. His son, Uday Hussein, is remembered as one of the most terrifying figures of his time, as his life was marked with privilege, cruelty, and unrestrained power. This is Damage Control, and this is the story of how Uday Hussein became one of the most feared men in Iraq. Uday was born in June 18, 1964 in Baghdad. From a young age, Uday was groomed to follow his father's footsteps. As Saddam's firstborn, he was initially seen as the heir apparent. However, his violent and erratic behaviour quickly revealed his unsuitability for leadership. Despite this, Uday held significant influence in various areas, including sports, media, and security. His involvement in these sectors was characterised by a level of sadism that even shocked members of Saddam's brutal regime. One of Uday's first major roles was in 1984, where he was appointed head of the Iraqi Olympic Committee and the Iraqi Football Federation. This led to a time where a poor team or individual performance could lead to prison and torture. Karim Saddam, a past soccer player in the Iraqi Championship, testified, "Since I was a frequent goal scorer, whenever I finished a match without scoring, I was taken to prison for 5 days. At first we were just locked up. Then came the beatings and whippings with the cables." Another humiliation Karim endured was being shaved bald after bad matches, whether in club play or the national team, the Lions of Mesopotamia. Playing for Al Rashid SC, the team of the Hussein family, he decided to transfer to a lower-ranked club to escape Uday Hussein's scrutiny. "I went to Al Zahra SC to get away from his grip." Other players told about similar experiences. "The first time they shaved off my hair, and the second time they forced me into a training camp for 2 weeks. I was with military personnel doing physically demanding drills from 5 AM to 3 PM. Those 2 weeks aged me. Playing for the national team became an additional source of stress and anxiety for the former midfielder of Al Rashid SC. We all hoped not to be selected because we feared the torture." He also said that if we played poorly, we would be sent to the Iranian front. On top of that, he constantly insulted us, even though we were all respectful men. In 1993, after the Iraqi national team failed to qualify for the 1994 FIFA World Cup, Uday forced the players to train with concrete balls. Those who did not meet his standards were dragged through gravel pits and forced to jump into sewage tanks, causing severe infections. On another occasion, he imprisoned the entire national volleyball team in a private jail he had constructed in the basement of the Olympic Committee building. The prison had a low ceiling, preventing the players from sitting or standing properly in what Uday called a motivational exercise. In his quest to maintain an iron grip on Iraqi sports, Uday established the Al Rashid Sports Club in 1983, which quickly became one of Iraq's most successful football clubs. However, the success of Al Rashid was not achieved through fair play. Uday forcibly transferred the best players from other teams to Al Rashid, often kidnapping them and coercing them into playing for his club. Resistance was met with brutal force, and his players had no choice but to comply with his demands. Of course, sports journalists who dared to criticize his handling of the different teams or report his atrocities were met with severe repercussions. Uday's brutality wasn't limited to athletes. His personal life was equally horrific. He had a palace that was more than a den of debauchery, complete with indoor fountains, erotic murals, and massive stashes of drugs. He was known for kidnapping women who caught his eye, bringing them to his palace where they faced unspeakable horrors. Uday's obsession with control and power extended into every facet of his life, including his relationships. His 2 marriages, both to daughters of high-ranking officials, ended in disaster as he violently abused his brides. Despite his appetite for power and sexual indulgence, it is widely recognized that Uday was highly intelligent. In 1998, he earned a doctorate in political science from the University of Baghdad, completing his thesis titled "The World After the Cold War." Although he had official roles, Uday's true power lay in the shadowy underworld of smuggling and black market operations, which thrived under the protection of his father's regime. This criminal empire allowed Uday to indulge in every whim while exerting ruthless control over those around him. Uday's criminal enterprises were diverse and extensive. He was deeply involved in the smuggling of oil, which was under international sanctions following Iraq's invasion of Kuwait. This lucrative operation allowed him to accumulate significant wealth, which he used to fund his extravagant lifestyle. Uday also trafficked in cigarettes and cocaine, creating a black market that extended beyond Iraq's borders. His control over these illegal activities made him one of the most powerful figures in Iraq, feared and loathed in equal measure. Among his more bizarre ventures was his ownership of a fast food restaurant chain called Super Chicken and an ice cream company named The Wave. These businesses served as fronts for laundering money from his more illicit operations. Uday's involvement in these seemingly irregular enterprises was an example of his ability to blend the banal with the brutal, using them as tools to extend his influence and control. Uday Hussein was known to have written for a newspaper under an alias. He wrote for the newspaper Babel, which he controlled, using the pseudonym Abu Sarhan, or the Father of Wolves. Babel was presented as an independent newspaper, but was essentially a tool for Uday to promote his views and intimidate his enemies. Uday's writings in Babel were characterized by the vitriolic and aggressive tone. Through his alias, he often published editorials which were scathing and inflammatory, reflecting his brutal personality. One notorious instance was an editorial he wrote on January 26, 2003, where he harshly criticized the United States and predicted a bloody conflict if America were to invade Iraq. The article was so extreme that it embarrassed the Iraqi government and prompted Vice Premier Tariq Aziz to clarify that Iraq did not seek war. Even with his terrifying reputation, Uday was also a figure of public disdain and ridicule. His extravagant lifestyle, with his penchant for loud, drunken parties, contrasted sharply with the suffering of the Iraqi people under international sanctions. Uday's car collection included a significant number of Porsches, Ferraris and Lamborghinis. Among them was the rare Lamborghini LM002 off-road vehicle, often called the Rambo Lambo. Porsches seemed to be his favourite, as he owned at least 4, including the 1986 Boxster and 3 993 Turbos. His collection also boasted other high-performance supercars like the Lamborghini Diablo and a Ferrari 555 Maranello. Uday had a fondness for cars inspired by the designs of the 1920s and 1930s, owning unique vehicles such as the London Taxi and a Ford Woody wagon. Of course, these cars were often purchased with the dirty money he made from oil and cocaine trafficking. Uday Hussein was once seen as the natural heir to his father, Saddam Hussein. As the eldest son, he was initially groomed to succeed Saddam and continue the family's grip over Iraq. But Uday's reputation for cruelty and sadism overshadowed any potential he might have as a leader. Even his father, Saddam, thought he was too erratic to be in charge, which led to his relationship with his father and younger son, Qusay, to be strained. The turning point for Uday would happen in 1988, where he murdered Kamal Hanna Gegio. Kamal Hanna Gegio was the personal bodyguard of Saddam Hussein, serving also as his valet and food taster. Around 1983, Gegio introduced Saddam to Samira Shabanda, who would later become Saddam's second wife. Gegio organized several meetings between them, and the couple secretly married in 1986. From that point, Samira Shabanda began to appear publicly with Saddam Hussein. This situation greatly displeased both Saddam's first wife, Sujita Talfa, and their son, Uday. Uday viewed the marriage as an affront to his mother's honor and a threat to his status as his father's heir. On October 18, 1988, during a reception held in honor of Egypt's First Lady, Suzanne Mubarak, Uday confronted Kamal Hanna Gegio and fatally struck him with a golf club, before finishing him off with gunfire. Saddam Hussein immediately ordered his son's arrest, but Uday was released after his mother pleaded for his forgiveness. Saddam exiled his son to Switzerland in an attempt to diminish his chaotic behavior, but his exile was short-lived as Uday's violent tendencies resurfaced, leading to his eventual expulsion for illegal possession of firearms. In contrast to Uday, his younger brother Qusay was more controlled and strategic. Qusay's calm demeanor and calculated approach to power made him a more suitable candidate to inherit Saddam's mantle. As a result, Saddam gradually shifted important responsibility to Qusay, particularly in the military and security sectors. Qusay was entrusted with overseeing the elite Republican Guard and the internal security apparatus. roles that were critical in maintaining the regime's stability. By the late 90s, it became clear that Qusay, not Uday, would be Saddam's chosen successor. This shift was formalized in 2000, when Qusay was publicly recognized as the heir apparent. Uday's reaction to the sidelining was a mix of resentment and increased brutality. His diminishing influence only fueled his anger, leading him to further acts of violence and debauchery. In 1991, both of Saddam Hussein's daughters were married off, each to one of two brothers. One of these brothers, Hussein Kamal, held a significant position as the head of Iraq's nuclear project, a role that earned him Saddam's favor. Saddam saw Kamal as exceptionally talented, and even considered him for a potential successor. However, the situation didn't sit well with Uday, who was greatly jealous of Kamal's influence and position. The tension eventually escalated to the point where Uday attempted to kill Kamal. When Kamal survived the assassination attempt, he decided it was too dangerous to stay in Iraq. So, Kamal, his brother, and their wives, Saddam's daughters, fled to Jordan seeking asylum. Their defection infuriated Saddam. Determined to bring them back, he reached out and managed to convince them to return to Iraq, promising a peaceful resolution. Despite their fears, they agreed to come back. This turned out to be a poor decision for the men. Upon their return, the two brothers were forced to divorce Saddam's daughters. Soon after, they were both executed in a brutal fashion. Their bodies were tied to cars and dragged through the streets of Baghdad, as a gruesome warning to anyone who might consider defying Saddam and anyone who might consider getting in Uday's way. With a growing list of enemies, it was only a matter of time before Uday's luck ran out. In 1996, driving his purple Ferrari through Baghdad, Uday stopped in the El Mansour district because he had spotted a beautiful girl. He sent only his friend Ali Sahar to persuade her to join him, but as he was waiting in the car, Uday was ambushed and shot 7 times. Ali Sahar would save his life by rushing him to hospital. A few years later, Ali attempted to flee Iraq but failed. In retaliation, Uday ordered his elite militia, the Fedayeen Saddam, to cut out Ali Sahar's tongue and condemn his brother and nephew to death, although they were ultimately spared. The assailants, who aimed to end Uday's reign of terror in Iraq, were swiftly executed along with their family members. Uday never fully recovered from his injuries, resulting in a permanent limp for the rest of his life. Contrary to popular belief, the attack did not leave him impotent. Rather, it seemed to amplify his already intense cravings for sex and violence. While many reports of Uday's murders and sexual assaults have been exaggerated or even fabricated, there is no doubt that his sadistic tendencies and sexual obsessions increasingly dominated his life. Uday Hussein locked his grip on the Iraqi population through his control of the brutal paramilitary force known as the Fedayeen Saddam. The group operated completely outside of the law and reported directly to Uday, effectively serving as his private army. He used the Fedayeen to eliminate opponents and terrorize the Iraqi people, while also establishing a vast criminal empire that smuggled cocaine and goods, sanctioned by the UN after Iraq's invasion of Kuwait. As a devoted Star Wars enthusiast, Uday designed the helmets and uniforms of the Fedayeen to resemble Darth Vader's outfit. Despite their intimidating appearance, these helmets were made of low-quality fiberglass and offered little to no protection in combat. In the early 2000s, the geopolitical landscape began to shift dramatically. The United States, under President George W. Bush, intensified its scrutiny of Iraq, citing concerns over weapons of mass destruction and Iraq's alleged ties to terrorism. These claims, although later proven to be unfounded, set the stage for a full-scale invasion. The international community was divided, but the US pressed forward with its plans to topple Saddam Hussein's regime. As the threat of invasion loomed, Uday and his brother Qusay prepared for the worst. Uday's paranoia and brutality escalated. He continued to indulge his vices, all the while knowing that his days of unchecked power might be numbered. When a US-led coalition launched Operation Iraqi Freedom in March 2003, the Hussein regime quickly began to crumble. The initial bombardment, known as shock and awe, targeted key infrastructure and military installations, aiming to dismantle Saddam's power base rapidly. Within weeks, coalition forces had taken control of Baghdad, and the Hussein family members went into hiding. Uday and Qusay fled to Mosul, seeking refuge in a mansion owned by a loyal supporter. The fall of Baghdad marked the beginning of an intensive manhunt for high-ranking members of the regime. The US military issued a deck of playing cards featuring the most wanted figures, with Saddam Hussein the ace of spades, Qusay as the ace of clubs, and Uday as the ace of hearts. The capture or elimination of these figures became a top priority for coalition forces. When the US military arrived at Iraq's Olympic headquarters, searching for the ace of hearts, they made a gruesome discovery. A medieval torture chamber. Inside, they found a rack, an iron maiden, and a horrifying contraption made from bed wire frames used to electrocute anyone unfortunate enough to be trapped inside. Evidence of Uday Hussein's brutal reign was everywhere, but he was nowhere to be found. On July the 22nd, 2003, US forces received a tip-off that Uday and Qusay were hiding in a villa in Mosul, in a city in northern Iraq. The villa belonged to a local businessman who had been an ally of the Hussein family. This businessman, seeking the $30 million bounty on the brothers' heads, walked to a nearby US Army base to turn them in. The US military quickly mobilized to capture the two most wanted men in Iraq. Task Force 20, supported by soldiers from the 101st Airborne Division and armed with Apache helicopters and anti-tank missiles, surrounded the villa. They called for the occupants to surrender, but Uday and Qusay refused to give up without a fight. A fierce gun battle ensued, lasting for over 4 hours. The brothers and their bodyguards, including Qusay's 14-year-old son, Mustafa, were heavily armed and resisted fiercely from within the building. Despite several attempts to storm the villa, US forces faced intense resistance. The defenders used automatic weapons and grenades to repel the attackers. The situation escalated, prompting the US military to launch a series of missile strikes and send in additional reinforcements. The sustained assault eventually reduced the villa to rubble. When the dust settled, US troops entered the remains of the building and found 4 bodies. Among them were Uday, Qusay, and Mustafa. The identification process confirmed their bodies through dental records. Uday Hussein, who had terrorized so many with his brutality, met his end in a fiery and violent confrontation. The deaths of Uday and Qusay were significant blows for the remnants of Saddam Hussein's regime. They marked the end of an era of unimaginable cruelty and signaled the downfall of a family that had ruled Iraq with an iron fist for decades. For many Iraqis, the death of Uday Hussein brought a sense of relief and the hope that the country could begin to heal from the horrors of his reign. The US military, to quell rumors and confirm the deaths, released the photographs of the bodies. This move was intended to provide closure and assure the Iraqi people that Uday's reign of terror was truly over. However, the brutality of the images also sparked controversy and criticism. In 2003, when the US soldiers entered Uday Hussein's Baghdad palace, they discovered a villa dedicated entirely to his harem. Evidence of Uday's sexual addiction was everywhere. The residence was decorated with paintings of nude women and stacks of internet printouts featuring prostitutes, each accompanied by handwritten ratings. A US Army captain described it as the largest collection of naked women I'd ever seen. The full extent of Uday Hussein's extravagant lifestyle became quickly apparent when soldiers found $1 million worth of liquor and fine wines, multiple garages filled with luxury cars, and even a private zoo housing 2 cheetahs, 5 lions, and a bear. Thanks for your interest in another episode of Damage Control. If you enjoyed the story, please like and share, and stay tuned for more gripping tales from history's darkest corners.